Fisherman Peter Maki says, Salt Strong raises the bar again. This is unparalleled in the fishing and boating world. I appreciate all the work invested in this Smart Fishing Spots app. Angler Neil Haygood says, thanks for what looks to be an awesome Swiss Army knife of fishing apps. Guys, Joe Simons here with Salt Strong. If you haven't checked out the Smart Fishing Spots app and software, what the heck are you waiting on? This is next level. It is the all-in-one app, has everything from radar and sonar and tides and wind and weather and this underwater 3D charts. It is absolutely amazing for tracking all of your trips and predicting the best time and tide and time of day to go out there and catch inshore slams. It is all there in the Smart Fishing Spots app. And the best news is it's completely for free for our insider members. So if you've been on the fence, I hope this is what takes you over the edge. Come join us. It's saltstrong.com. You'll see a button to join us. For you current members, thank you guys so much. We have a whole lot more coming. Here's the episode.
It's in my soul. Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, back again. Got my boy Justin. What's up, Justin?
Yo, what's up, man?
Dude, how do we make sense of this whole thing? We have all these different changes. It turns out, if you're listening, we're watching, or regardless of how you're doing, we're going to go through this 20 pages. You need an attorney to read through all this stuff. And I'm kidding. FWC actually did a pretty good job of just kind of summarizing and putting bullet points. But still, it is confusing when you're going out there just trying to catch a redfish and can't decide if you're supposed to keep or not because you can't understand what's going on. A lot of different changes being proposed. Not all of these have gone into effect yet. So we want to go like right off the bat say that what we're going to talk about here has not officially happened yet. And I think that's what's caused a lot of confusion because we saw the whole thing about catch and release only in Indian River. And people all of a sudden start, oh my gosh, I can't believe we can't keep them. That has not happened yet. It might happen very soon, but it has not happened yet. And there's some great stuff in here. There's also some stuff that some of you might not like as much. But in general, I think the part about taking it from 3 zones to 9 is a good thing, right? Because sometimes you see this massive area, right? And not just like a couple cities, but many, many counties. And some people up here catching trout left and right, and some people down here can't get a trout to save their lives, and yet they're all lumped into one big thing. So I think that's a great, hopefully addition if this all goes through. So Justin, I've got up on screen. I'm gonna let you do a lot of the talking here, and we'll just go right here to slide number 1 out of 20.
So kind of the SparkNote version before we dive into this is like Joe said, FWC, instead of considering, at least for the state of Florida, all of the Gulf and all the Atlantic, or before there were 3 sections, Northwest, Southwest, and then a chunk of the Atlantic.
Look at them right
there. Yep, you can kind of see it right there. The current state regulations are kind of broken up into 3 sections here throughout Florida for harvest regulations for redfish in particular. There's harvest regulations for all the other species, but in this, little layout from FWC, it's looking at redfish in particular. And you can kind of see what the current state regulations are. We've got, 18 to 27 inches is the slot limit that we all know, 8 fish limit per vessel, and 6 fish per person for transport per person move. And, the Northeast region, you get 2 redfish. For Northwest and the South region, which is Central East Coast, all the way down to the Everglades and up to about that Tampa Bay area, kind of cuts off red at like Spring Hill, Hudson. It's 1 red per person. And then same for the Northwest. But the cool thing about this, guys, is what you need to realize is that FWC, a lot of these decisions and these conversations of how we're going to regulate redfish harvest and the stock of like what we can keep, what we're able to possess in a day, has a lot to do with attending and speaking out at these meetings that FWC holds in different regions throughout the year. And I think now every year, every passing year, people are seeing this out of the corner of their eye, and they're knowing that FWC is having these conversations, these meetings to hear the public speak out to what their experiences are, what they're seeing, what they're catching in their local waters. And as we kind of scroll further down on this, you'll see that the proposed mindset is that we're, instead of looking at the state in 3 sections, okay, we'll come back to this here in a second. Instead of looking at the state in 3 sections, we're going to start looking at it in a bigger view. So what you see here on the map is there's 9 different regions that FWC is proposing to separate Florida into. And I think that's great, because what it's doing is, instead of saying, all right, the Panhandle and Crystal River have the same redfish stock, same amount of people catch about the same amount of fish, they've just kind of lumped that whole section together for a long time. And now they're looking at it and saying, you know, Pensacola redfish and redfish in, you know, Ozello, the population's not really the same. You know, I mean, yes, fish move around, and there's a good chance that breeder fish could, you know, come up at both locations, but day in, day out fishing, they're different stocks, and they're different little sub-communities of fish. So FWC is going to propose that we have management in 9 different regions to get a better picture or a better view of what these stocks look like in each region. And I think that's great. A lot of that of what we're going to find out as we scroll through is the feedback from each of these regions of what local anglers are saying. How is their fishery doing? Are they finding a lot of redfish? Are they catching more or less? What's attributed to that? Seagrass presence or absence, more bait fish, less bait fish. I mean, all these conversations are being had by the public. And the more you attend and speak out at these events, the more information they're going to have to better determine what the fishery is like in your backyard. So I love that they're doing this. I love that they're taking it further to say, you know, there's a lot more areas to take into consideration than just lumping it into 3 groups.
Yep. And so we're going to break down all 9 of these on what they're proposing to do here. The other thing I thought was interesting was this captain crew bag limit. So it says strong stakeholder support. And what that tells me is, currently, if Justin and I go out with a captain, let's just say for redfish, and let's just say in our area, let's just say we're in the Northeast, we're able to keep 2 each, right? So it's 2 for me, 2 for Justin. And then we could also get 2 for the captain, even though he might not have caught them per se. We could literally go in with 6 total redfish, I believe is how I understand it. And a lot of these captains, and especially in the lagoon and even in Tampa Bay, after that really nasty, you know, red tide that we experienced, a lot of the captains came together and says, guys, like, just to make sure we have jobs here for the sustainability of these fisheries, let's agree, like, to tell people right up front, we're going to release everything, and explain to them why, right? So to turn the charter into, you know, sport fishing, not just, you know, bringing home as much meat as you can, and also to be able to talk about conservation on the charter, about what's happening and why this seagrass is not here anymore and it used to be here a year ago. And so that was cool. And so what I'm guessing is a lot of more captains probably are attending these meetings than just the normal average Joe recreational angler, and they're going in there saying, guys, like, FWC, meaning guys, take away this, you know, this kind of perk, if you will, because it used to be a perk back in the day. You know, it was a big deal, right? People would come from all over, and it's kind of about how many fish you bring back to the cleaning table, and then hopefully, you know, back into your cooler. And I think there's definitely been a mindset shift, and so it sounds like most of the captains that are going to these events, which, as Justin said, that is where they're getting a lot of the feedback to make these decisions, are saying, "Hey, let's get rid of the ability for us to be able to keep fish." So we will scroll down here. This is an annual review example. Oh man, it's bringing
Are you there?
memories. Yeah, can you hear me?
I think you might be cutting.
Oh no, did it freeze?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Woo! We're back.
Woo,
back.
Man. Yes. Internet connection unstable. Unbelievable.
It's all good. So
podcast. And
I wanted to say, do you remember Walker's Cay Chronicles?
Oh, yeah.
Flip Pallet. So over the, I'm thinking that was like 80s, right? Maybe kind of trickled into the early 90s too. That show, and I think you would agree with this, that over the past 30 years, the view of redfish as a sport fish has changed substantially. There are still people that love to go out and harvest redfish, and I think that's great. I think everybody should have the choice and the ability to go out and harvest if they want to. But I would say that, we kind of talked off record about Mosquito Lagoon and Indian River, for example, areas to be just catch and release. I would say that a good majority of guides, maybe not all, are in support of this for the future of that fishery in their backyard. There's a lot of changes happening. There's a significant loss of seagrass, and the regrowth has not been rapid. It's very, very slow. And I think that, for the betterment of the fishery and for the future of a lot of these captains and their business, catch and release would be in their favor. That's giving people the opportunity to catch quality redfish year after year comes with us not pulling from that stock.
Yep. And then in the bass world, I mean, they went through this, and a gentleman by the name of Ray Scott, who started Bass, which is, the Bassmaster magazine, Bassmaster Classic. I mean, back in the day, every one of those tournaments and the old school bass derbies, you literally brought every bass back and you freaking killed them. You put them on a, you just like you do with, mahi in certain areas. You go by there and put them on a pegboard and use how many bass did you kill that day? And Ray Scott, basically, he was one that coined the thing that the term that, hey, a bass is too profitable to catch just once. That was his kind of saying is, hey, a bass is too profitable to catch just once. Throw it back and let's let these things repopulate and grow. And literally now that's all they do. Can you imagine going to a bass tournament and they just kill every bass? It seems crazy now, but for decades, that was what they did. And he really changed the mentality of bass fishermen across the country. And now even has trickled into other countries just based on that is, hey, guys, if we continue down this path, it's not sustainable. So we're not here advocating saying, hey, we should never keep another fish again. I want to be clear on that, because I remember last time we did a podcast like this, I got some hate mail saying, oh, I can't believe you're saying we should never keep a fish. We are just relaying the message and also relaying things that have worked in the past. And clearly people still do keep some bass. And even Ray Scott says, if it's like a 16-pounder, I'm keeping that sucker and I'm going to get that thing mounted. Says you still have every right to do it, but at the same point, if everyone kept their limit every single time, there's really no sustainability in that. So now we're going to break down each of these regions. So we got the Panhandle first. Justin, what are they proposing here in the Panhandle?
So we can kind of see it here. No major concerns, but trends to watch. Long-term escapement trend generally declining, but above management target. Fishing effort increased. Angler satisfaction mixed. A lot of this, it kind of sounds like for the Panhandle area, it sounded like a wash, 50-50. Some people are saying, hey, red fishing is great, still catching a bunch. And other people saying that probably with increased angler pressure post-COVID, that they may not be noticing as many as before, or it may be more difficult to catch fish. I think that's natural and probably occurs here all over the Southeast, not just for that region. So bag limit to still maintain at 1 fish per person per day.
And what does escapement mean? Is that how many redfish escape from dolphin?
I don't know. We've read that. I don't know if we're entirely sure what exactly escapement means. They keep using this term, and it could mean a lot of different things. I guess my thought would be that it's not necessarily recapture rate, because people don't know exactly what redfish they capture again, but from one fishing trip to the next, are they catching more or less? So I think that's kind of what it's trying to determine, is the general rate of which people are saying their satisfaction of catching fish or not catching as many compared to years prior and trips prior. But I don't know exactly how they've determined that particular term.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be just from hearing from both the recreational and the commercial, or the captains that are going to these meetings, and in some of the surveys that they are sending out. But still, I mean, the vast majority of people don't fill out surveys, and the vast majority of people don't attend these workshops, unfortunately. And I get it. I mean, I've been invited to every one, and it's tough, right? They're usually in the middle of the day on a work day, right? And it's just like, man, it's tough to get away. So I get it. But the good news is there are a lot more recreational people attending than probably ever before. just because they are realizing that, hey, if I want my voice to be heard, I got to show up to these things. And FWC wants you there. They want more data, right? They happen to be horrible marketers, in my opinion, right? That's why they don't get the word out about a lot of this stuff in time. I mean, they're scientists, right? For the most part, they're biologists, and they're not promoters and marketers. And so they do want you to be there, just so you know. They love hearing more input and more data. And if you email them, which we encourage all of our members to do, and even internally, we email them a lot, they read those things. They actually do. They don't just go in the trash. If you send them an email on any proposed idea or things that you're seeing in your area, it will be read and to get to the right people, just as an FYI. All right, up next, Big Bend region.
So this is interesting because in terms of population throughout the entire state of Florida, the Big Bend region is huge, but you think about the amount of space of where water makes its way to the coast and makes contact. There's not nearly as much development in this part of Florida as there are other parts of Florida. So I'm always interested in knowing when they put survey results in this pie chart, out of how many people is that total survey, because the amount of people fishing Big Bend inshore or even offshore, and the amount of area and water that the Big Bend has been classified as is crazy. There's not nearly as many people to occupy that amount of space as there would be like Tampa Bay area, just north of Anclote down to like South Sarasota, Venice, until we get into Southwest Florida. There's significantly more people fishing that type of area than the Big Bend region, where there is a ton of water to explore. So this proposal to increase the bag limit to 2 fish per person, reduce vessel to 4 fish per vessel, I think makes sense. I mean, they wrote it here, above management target, catch rate stable with increased effort, highest angler satisfaction, I guess, out of all the 9 regions that they're looking at. So that's great. I mean, you can see the pie chart here. It seems like between good and very good, or the overwhelming majority of close to 70% right there of people that are satisfied with the red fishery in their particular area. Again, I don't know if this is a survey out of a couple hundred people or a couple thousand people, but that's positive to see. And personally, I would support an increased catch rate of 1 more redfish for the area, given the amount of area that you have to explore and fish.
And this is one of the few, or maybe only, the areas that got an increase per person.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We'll keep moving on. Tampa Bay region.
Yeah. I want to hear what you think about this one too, because this is kind of your backyard too, Joe, and you fish a lot with Luke in Tampa Bay. But just kind of reviewing the spark notes here, people are acknowledging red tide is a common occurrence. 2021 bloom from last year, it was 1.5 times longer than a 20-year average. So each time that it occurred, the period of time in which red tide was acknowledged, the period of time where they feel it within the centralized area that it's recorded, it's no longer present or considered to be a threat or an issue, that the period of time in which red tide occurs seems to be increasing over time. And this past year, it was a long period of time and a much larger area of impact. So I think they're listing maintain 1 fish per person, nothing changing from a regulation standpoint, but acknowledging that it sounds like from their research and from hearing from the public that red tide is the biggest concern to redfish stocks in the area. I would agree that that's a big part of it, but it's not just red tide. A lot of that's fueled from nutrient dumping, fertilizer runoff, a lot more people moving to Central West Coast, increase in population. It's a lot of factors that lead to that. And red tide's the biggest kind of end result that's causing a lot of these issues. But there's a lot more to the core of this, right? To mitigate the things that are feeding this red tide issue.
Yeah. In Tampa Bay, they had a massive recovery in the 70s and in the 80s and got their seagrass back. Water's looking beautiful through the 90s. And now it seems to be reverting in a negative trend, losing a ton of seagrass. Some of the areas that Luke and I used to fish just a few years ago that had a lot of healthy grass are now not looking that great. There's still some fish, but it just doesn't look as good. And we never know the answer, right? Maybe the fish will adapt like they have in the lagoon. There's still fish to be caught there, even though the seagrass for the most part is getting destroyed. But still, that's not something that we should be excited about and just say, okay, I guess it just is as it is. It's interesting here. It says in this region, the for hire, meaning the guides, they're less satisfied. They're the ones in the water every single day, right? With redfish fishing than the private recreational anglers who, for the most part, are out there maybe once or twice a month versus 20 something times per month, sometimes 30 if they're fishing every single day. And so I have to look at that a little bit more seriously from the people who are literally depending on it. And some of these are my friends, right, who are saying, man, it's tough. We're not seeing them like we used to. And I would agree with that. Some of the areas that not year round, but areas that we always knew redfish would congregate during certain times of the year and certain tides in Tampa Bay are not there anymore. I don't know if they went somewhere else or if those are just part of the stock that got killed during the last red tide or what, but it to me, it's not where it should be. And that's from someone who, essentially makes a living fishing, not like a fishing charter captain, but still, if, our members aren't catching fish, it's tough for our business, just being honest. So we want as many members having as many opportunities to catch as many fish as possible. And so I'm more with the guides on this one. I don't think it's where it should be. And I'm fine with it staying the same or even being contracted a little bit in terms of what people can keep. We personally, Luke and I, don't keep redfish. We throw them all back. The only exception would be is if one completely swallowed a hook or a lure where it was so far down and there's just no way to save them, and it was obviously in the slot. That would be the one exception, but that hasn't even happened this year. So that's my take on the Tampa Bay.
Yeah, region. What I thought was interesting, I went out with Luke a couple weeks back and we were poking around his local waters in St. Pete, and areas that I thought looked amazing and would hold redfish don't. And it's one thing to hear from you and to hear from Luke and locals in Tampa Bay that say, this area, it's just not, it's not what it was. And it's not like last year or the year before, where there normally certain tides and, throughout the year, you can find a couple really nice redfish and put in some time and go out and fish one of 8 different general areas in St. Pete, like his backyard, and do well. And we went out, we poked around and we searched. I think we saw one redfish and it was like on the move.
Yep.
And I was surprised. I was like, this looks perfect. I see some mullet there. I see birds, but I don't see redfish. And we're at a perfect part of the tide. It just started with incoming. Fish should be moving closer to these islands that are out there. And he's like, I don't know what to say other than it wasn't like this prior to red tide, and the red tide happened and now they're not here. And that's the only major or catastrophic thing that's happened in the area. So it does kind of lead you to believe that's the big aspect of what's affecting the redfish population. So I'm just saying, like, it's one thing to hear it from us. And then now that I've actually gone over and I fish that area where people are talking about it, and I can see and experience, like, oh, wow, no joke. Like, there's no redfish here, or there's significantly less. Like, this is a problem. We need to acknowledge and do something about it.
Yep. And this is also where it's tough having, different regions that could be really, really big. St. Pete and Tampa, for the most part, are like touching, right? I mean, they're brought together all the time. They're certainly in the same region. I mean, they're right next to each other, right? They share the same bay. And St. Pete is what you're talking to. That's where Luke lives. The areas where we used to catch redfish, they're gone. Like, we can't even catch them there. But yet, go just a little further south, like down to Ruskin, like E.G. Simmons and Cockroach, and south of that, like Piney Point, ironically, where all the madness happened with this red tide. And there's redfish everywhere, right? And that's not that far away. I mean, it's a boat ride. You don't even have to trail if you're already on the water in St. Pete, you just shoot straight down. So that's what's so crazy is there's been areas that have just been decimated where the local people there say, man, it's horrible. And then you go just 30 minutes south and all of a sudden there's tons of fish. So it's been very, very odd. And that's where it's tough, to make general assumptions or decisions, just because it varies so much, even from city to city. So onward to Sarasota, speaking of going a little bit further south, this one looks like it stayed the same on the bag limit, one red per person, but reduced it on the vessel side, huh?
Yeah, and I experienced this myself when I did an insider report in an area that I have gone in the past and I've caught redfish and snook and trout at. It was in Buttonwood Harbor area, and I had fished that place for the past 6-7 years. And even if I don't catch a redfish, I'll see a bunch in different parts of the tide. And I revisited no less than 10 or 12 little juicy points and coves and areas that I found them in the past, and I didn't see a single one. I got one snook out of that area, and there were mullet, and there were sheepshead, and there were, there was all kinds of other life there, but not like what it was in the past. And it kind of seems like redfish are this canary. It's almost like if you find them, it's a sign of a good, healthy fishery. But if you don't, you got to beg the question, what's going on with redfish? Same with trout too. We asked that too, like, where have all the trout gone? But overall, that they're acknowledging the same thing. Red tide is seriously an issue throughout Sarasota Bay. A big stretch of the bay gets hit by it, and it lasts for a long time, and it's a huge issue. Now, Tampa Bay is a bigger body of water compared to Sarasota Bay, but maybe it's how the water flows through the bay itself from north to south and coming out of the passes. There's 2 or 3 passes in that area. I've seen it in years past. I'll go with my dad and I and my wife. We would get a condo on the beach, and we rented kayaks and came inside. I think it was Three Sisters Key, and went south, and we saw giant mullet just like congregated, and they weren't jumping, but they were kind of spinning in a circle. And then we found a school of 40 or 50 redfish and snook just lazily kind of sitting on the flat, not moving. You could bump them in the head with a lure and they wouldn't eat it. And I was like, something's not right. And red tide was going on at the time, because when we got back to the beach, there were all kinds of bait fish washed up on shore. So Sarasota Bay in particular, looking at the entire state of Florida, is a hotspot area for red tide. So I can understand. Personally, I'm a little surprised. They're stating stakeholders' desire for more conservative regulations, probably because of the lack of fish that they're catching in years prior, and this year in particular. Yes, maintaining a 1 fish per person makes sense. I would almost be in favor, me personally, of a temporary closure in light of recent events. Not forever, not saying that, people can't keep fish forever. We're talking 6 months, a year, or a little longer. I think that it's important to acknowledge what happens in each respective area and to give it a chance to rebound. There are other success stories of protecting and keeping certain fish as catch and release, and seeing that area rebound from these type of protective efforts. So I would have been in support of that, but I think at bare minimum, yes, to just maintain status of 1 fish per person is fine.
Good stuff. We will move on down. Charlotte Harbor impacts a lot of people as well. Looks like they've did the same thing as Sarasota, maintain 1 fish per person, and then reduced the vessel limit to 2 fish per vessel.
Now, the red tide conversation, I'm sure, is definitely applicable for Charlotte Harbor. But one thing to consider is that just a little further south of Charlotte Harbor, and I'd have to look back at that map to see how much of that stretch is considered the Charlotte Harbor region, you have the Caloosahatchee River to the south. And okay, so Charlotte Harbor, and then you got Southwest Florida kind of falls into this category. We're going to get into it next. Even up into Charlotte Harbor, and you've got the Myakka that dumps out into Charlotte Harbor, and a lot of freshwater runoff. You're going to have, after hurricanes and storms, significant changes in salinity. Yes, that's understandable. But what additional nutrient is going to be dumped down into the harbor? Charlotte Harbor to the northern tip of Pine Island Sound, Bokeelia, I know you've fished that in the past couple times, is not that far. And you'd be surprised at how much water covers that area and how water can move from Caloosahatchee up through Pine Island and Matlacha and into Bokeelia. And for sure, Lake Okeechobee discharge plays a big role into that, and even though that Charlotte Harbor region might not be that Southwest Florida region we're going to get into, I think that the Myakka and the Caloosahatchee and how water flows and moves south or north and meets up at that point, a lot of that's still affected from Lake Okeechobee discharge. So which feeds into red tide ultimately is kind of what I'm getting to. All that additional nutrient that's dumping out from agricultural result is causing red tide blooms and issues to be exacerbated. So I can understand maintain 1 fish per person, reduce the limit 2 fish per vessel. But that Charlotte Harbor region is kind of a unique fishery. You have the natural runoff from the Mayaca, but you've got another big river source that's playing into the water quality aspect for that area as well.
This little graph here, young of year indices of abundance, number per seine sets. This is FWC doing what Luke and I did with them. I assume where you're taking the big seine nets out and doing samples all over the area.
Yeah, I assume so. It looks like they had a peak there, 2002, 2003 time period. And then it's kind of gone down and gone up and gone down. But for the most part, it seems to change every couple of years. That's information. I don't know how pertinent it is in regards to red tide occurrence. You could have yearly class of fish. It's not like it's going to constantly be on an upward trend or high for periods of years. That up and down that you see from about 2010 to 2020 could be from a lot of different factors. I don't know that it's directly a good sign to reflect what's happening in terms of water quality for Charlotte Harbor, which is the biggest reason for people's ability or inability to catch fish from one year to the next. So they're saying that information. Personally, I don't know how relevant it is to that particular region as an example.
Yeah, we'll keep moving then.
Yeah.
To the southwest region.
Aha.
That's your buddy, you said, huh? Pierce.
Yeah, I know Pierce. Yeah, that's a really nice red, man. I don't know exactly where that's at, but now I got to call him and find out.
It's pretty funny. All right, so southwest, what's happening here? Red tide occurrence.
So
stakeholders want more conservative.
First thing I think of red tide. I think of Southwest Florida. I think of Captains for Clean Water too. I think of fighting the good fight on behalf of all fishermen and residents through Southwest Florida, and we'll make our way over to the East Coast as well. About Lake Okeechobee, water discharge, salinity differences, increase in nutrient and red tide issues, lack of shellfish and supporting bait fish populations in the area to support the redfish and trout and snook we're trying to catch. Lots of problems have happened over the past, I don't know how many years it's been going on, right? We started seeing a lot of this start popping up, 2015, 2016 kind of time period. Mm-hmm. It's probably been going on a lot earlier than that, but it takes time for us to notice the issues with red tide in the area. I remember a lot of the views of people flying over and taking pictures there at Sanibel and where the water dumps out of the Sanibel Causeway. And you could see that mixture of fresh water and salt water, that brown into the green. And it's just crazy because you kind of view Southwest Florida as being this pristine, white, sandy beaches, super clear water. I've experienced it walking along the beach in Sanibel, catching snook. To see what's changed in the past 7 or 8 years is insane. Again, another area that in light of recent events and what's going on, they're still proposing to maintain that 1 fish per person, reduce to 2 fish per vessel. Seems like the tendency is to maintain the opportunity for people to harvest. Wonderful. But to reduce the overall vessel limit across the board as you make your way from Sarasota down, along the southwest coast here.
Yep. So that's the southwest. And we're talking about Cobia here in just a little bit as well. So make sure to stick around, even if we've already hit your region. Cool little way to make money for every Cobia you catch and keep. Interesting.
Cool initiative.
Yeah. All right. So I find it interesting that on all these different regions, they're using different graphs, right? Almost everyone's got something a little. Well, that one didn't have one. Got something.
Yeah, that had same net catch rate.
This one's got acres of seagrass, so it's interesting. They all have different little graphs.
Yeah, right. It's not standardized amongst each region. And granted, some areas don't have seagrass, some areas have oysters, but yeah, it's not like the information. I don't know if it's just for that particular region. I would assume so, but they're not showing seine rates and whatnot for each region. This is what total directed angler trips, number of trips by the thousands, of how many people or how many trips per angler in the year. Is that what they're trying to record?
I am Ron Burgundy.
Ron Burgundy? Not entirely sure.
I don't know.
Southeast region, though, like, will you agree with me that catching a redfish in Miami is finding a needle in a haystack? Like in the Keys as well, right? I kind of need to look at that chart, but Southeast region, you've got flamingo, and flamingo can have a great red fishery, if you will. It does have a great inshore fishery so technically they're considering the Southwest, the Keys, and flamingo as well. And that cutoff border is right when you get down into Miami, up to about maybe Jupiter. Is kind of where that purple line cutoff looks like it's happening. East of Joby. So no, southeast would be Miami and further north. And yeah, I'll agree. If I go down and I fish like Jupiter to Miami, I'm going for snook and maybe a big trout. But finding redfish has been really tough. And there's like great grass flats throughout Biscayne Bay. You would imagine that some of that area would hold redfish, but it's tough. People that do catch them, I have a friend of mine down there. He's like, I'll be lucky if I get a 20-incher or a 21. Like, that's cooler of a catch than a bonefish in that area.
Yeah, it's crazy, which is why it says they have the lowest catch rates out of all the regions.
Yeah, majority of survey respondents reported fishery is good to fair. Probably in the northernmost section of that.
Yeah.
You know? You got to think, like, how much inshore waterway is there in Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, Boynton Beach, that chunk of the southernmost part of that region? There's not grass flats. It's intercoastal waterway and docks and fancy high-rise boats. So it's very, very different.
They should add on here on the regulations. If you do get 2 fish per vessel, then you also win an award.
Correct. Yeah. Call FWC when that happens.
Yeah. Give you a sticker. All right, cool. Moving on. Indian River. Now, this is the one that I think caused some confusion. I guess someone had posted this in either a Facebook group or in our insider community, and some people read it as it already happened, and so people are kind of freaking out. So what do we got? Indian River.
I'm reading all the little bullet points. So this is a fishery I fished a lot. We talk about it all the time in these podcasts, and Luke spent some time. He lived over in Melbourne area and fished Indian River Lagoon all the way up through Mosquito Lagoon and New Smyrna, Daytona. I think that's where the biggest chunk of this is. And yes, the biggest issue is seagrass die-off. We are a broken record every time we talk about it, but you can't talk about it enough because it is an important issue and it's going to take a long time for the recovery of this lagoon system. Mosquito Lagoon and Indian River is regarded as, like redfish capital of the world. Next to Louisiana. Louisiana redfish are a special breed, but it was for many, many years and still continues to be an exceptional red fishery. But since I'd say 2015 is when I started noticing algae blooms, seagrass die-off. I have a drone footage of pea soup green water in Mosquito Lagoon one day, and I look at it and almost cry every time I see it. And a lot has changed. A lot of anglers are reporting back because of that seagrass die-off, because of water quality and water clarity issues, they are catching less redfish. And this is not just from recreational anglers. This is from many guides as well. So because of that, there have been a lot of conversations, a lot of attention has been drawn to this particular region because it has gone from being this glorious, wondrous place to fish to essentially a desert wasteland. I mean, that if you go and you fished it in 2011 and you fish it now, 10 plus years later, it won't seem like the same place of what it once was. So I agree. This proposed regulation for catch and release only until metrics approve is a safe decision to ensure that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, that my friends and family, my kids someday would be able to go and enjoy this fishery, in some sense of the way that I had enjoyed it years prior. It may never recover to where it once was, but if we don't take action to at least try to protect our fishery and provide catch and release to that particular region, we're not saying you can't go further north or further south or even to the West Coast and catch and keep a redfish. I think it is important to acknowledge for that particular location.
Yep. And it sounds like the majority of all the people in the meetings are saying the same thing.
Agreed, yeah.
Northeast.
So I don't know a whole lot about that. Northeast region, you've got a lot of current flow. You've got much dirtier water, not nearly as much seagrass. Oysters come into effect. Shell bottom comes into effect. It's a very, very different fishery. Kind of resembles similar to Big Bend parts and over near Pensacola, like the Panhandle area. I'm not sure what the report is. My gut would say if you want to scroll up just a little bit, Joe, escapement rate increased since 2020 or 2012. Fishing effort relatively stable since 2-fish bag limit implemented, and that was a while back. Most survey respondents report fishery is good. Concerned stakeholders advocated for 1-fish bag limit. So kind of seems like there's a mixture of people. Some people are in support of keeping things the way that they are, and other people saying that they're noticing less fish being caught. I don't know if that's a 50-50 thing, 70-30 thing, but you take it all into consideration. And FWC is just saying we're going to maintain that 2 fish per person and reduce the vessel limit to 4 fish per vessel.
Yeah. What's interesting, reading the notes, the conversations with anglers and guides were more positive in the northern portion of this region than from the southern portion, where anglers and guides reported no longer seeing large schools of redfish. And the concerned anglers from Duval, St. John's, and Flagler were the ones who wanted the 1-fish bag limit. So this is where it does get tough by having a bunch of different fisheries in one zone or one area. So it's cool.
Richard, one of our coaches now, he's up in Georgia, right? And the fishery right there at that St. Mary's line of like Nassau Sound and north of that into St. Mary's in that Georgia area, there's just as much water as a big chunk of Jacksonville, but the population count is much less. And the regulations in Georgia are crazy. You can harvest way more redfish and trout and flounder once you make your way into Georgia and you get past that northeast, section of Jacksonville. So I can kind of understand further south. You have less creeks and waterways. Once you make your way down the St. John, you have a lot of just the St. John's River, and then a couple of mud flats and oyster bars. I mean, I fished Marine Land in an insider report. That's further south of, I believe, St. Augustine area in Ormond, it's north of Ormond Beach. And it was tough. There's not nearly as much area to fish to how many people live and reside and fish within that general area. Yep. But once you get north of Jacksonville and Nassau Sound and further north, there's a lot of area to fish and a lot of opportunities to catch redfish. So I can understand that.
Yep. So here's the summary. We won't go through all of it since we already covered it. But I think the 9 management regions, I would imagine everyone's in for that. I don't see a downside. If anything, do more of them. I know that also, I guess the only downside is it causes confusion, right? It used to be, you could look up, hey, what's the limit for redfish in the state of Florida? That was how it used to be back in the days. There's just one limit for the whole state. And now it's, I got different zones and it depends on the time of year. So I guess that's the only downside, but there's apps and obviously the FWC makes it pretty easy on their site to find out that information. So let's pivot real quick and talk about Cobia. So FWC, I guess, tagged us on Instagram. I didn't know about this. And so we looked into it and we're like, wow, that's interesting. Get $50 reward. I don't know if it means cash or a gift card. I have no idea. Does it say? It just says reward.
I don't know.
I'm guessing it's probably a check, but meaning cash. Anyhow, $50, and you get to keep the meat, which is cool. They just want your the carcass to be able to do some testing with. So I thought that was interesting.
Look at that time frame from March to September, which would be the time the part where a lot of these cobia are migrating and moving through various areas. You could find them on the grass flats of Tampa Bay. You could find them out on wrecks and reefs on the West Coast. But 2022 to 2024, that's going to go on as long as it's within that period of time of March to September.
Yep.
I don't know if they'll let slide a November, December cobia, because these fish, the whole point of this is to get a better idea of their migratory patterns and their reproductive tendencies. So what they're doing is they're collecting the carcass and then looking at the gonads of each fish to get an idea of how active or inactive that fish is at that particular location at the time that it was turned in. So it's interesting. They're trying to get a better idea of the health of that fishery of cobia in different regions, and kind of keeping this open to the angler to turn in the fish and say, hey, I caught a cobia. Let's find out what's going on with this fish. Is it sexually active right now? Is it reproducing? Has it eaten anything? Is its stomach empty? All this information. There's so much that can be found by the actual carcass. So I think that's a great incentive to the angler. Next legal cobia I keep, I'm gonna be calling my buddy where I'm at, the respective FWC agent, say, hey, what do I do? Where do I go with this thing?
Yeah, extra $50, dude.
Yeah,
double celebration. They got some gonads doing this promo. This is great. Speaking of gonads, real quick though, I talked to someone recently who I won't say any more than they weren't aware that the rules had changed and they caught a nice cobia, what used to be a nice cobia. And they did just change it, right? Was it June 1st or June 1st it changed?
I think so. It's
33 to 36.
Yeah. That's a big difference. So a lot of people were always in confusion. I've been one of those guys, be like, is it 33? Is it 34? What's the safe number? So yeah, as of right now, I believe that's changed.
Yeah. So it used to be 33 inches and now it's 36. So, a lot of those 34s, 35s, that seems to be what you always catch, right? It's barely.
There's a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's not legal anymore. So just FYI, make sure you know the rules on that. And you do, call the number and make sure you have a legal one, and you'll get your extra $50. And they also have a reward for tagging. If you can report a tag, it says catch a tag cobia, call that number and still release it too, which is cool. You don't have to harvest it. So hopefully that helps. We'll have more on this and just conservation stuff and in general. And we love to hear from you guys on what types of topics and thoughts and even guests to have on to talk about conservation. So hopefully this was helpful and made a little bit more sense of what the heck they're doing. We're still kind of confused on, I don't know why they just wouldn't use simpler terms and have, uniform graphs on this stuff. But, then again, I can't make all the rules there,
You get better every time though.
Yeah, I do. Hi, buddy. Anything else?
That's it. A lot of good info going around. Just be proactive about knowing the regulations for your area, season by season. Changes happen several times a year, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down. You want to make sure you got your license, that you know the regulations before you choose to harvest whatever species it is. We are responsible for doing that, and I feel like a lot of changes have been happening more and more frequently over the past 5+ years. So it's up to us to just be on top of that.
Yep. And speaking of licenses, make sure that you have an active license. There's someone recently actually registered for the CCA Star Tournament, caught a tagged redfish. So everything was legal. So this has been the first one. They get to pick either a brand new $75,000 truck or $70,000 boat. And they go all the way to the final stage, like past the lie detector test, and then realize the person didn't have an active fishing license. So lost that cost them $75,000. And basically they had, technically admitted to fishing without a license because they were it was purely by accident. But yeah, just make sure that yours is active and up to date. Man, that's horrible. Can you imagine?
It makes me really uncomfortable to think that, that's rough. Such a crazy opportunity slip through your fingers because you forget to make sure that your license is active. What did Tony mention on a call? Auto renew, guys. Go online and auto renew.
Yes.
If FWC apps on your phone, takes seconds to check it. Be on top of it.
Brutal. All right, guys. That is it for this episode. We will talk to you on the next. Thanks, Justin.
Peace out.
Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are fishing in her soul.